You're too damn stupid to handle real money, girl. Marcus Blackwell's hand shot forward, slamming Maya's notepad from her grip and sending it skidding across the marble floor. He stepped closer, deliberately invading her space as she bent to retrieve it. The Meridian Club fell dead silent. Marcus' $8.2 billion tech mogul loomed over the young black waitress, his voice dripping with venom. Stay down there where you belong. Stupid people like you should stick to cleaning floors, not handling my bills. Maya bent slowly to collect her scattered papers. Her movements remained steady, despite every eye in the restaurant boring into her. The vintage Cartier watch on her wrist caught the light for just a moment before disappearing back under her sleeve. Maybe stick to jobs that don't require thinking, Marcus added, loud enough for the 30 witnesses to hear every word. Have you ever been so publicly humiliated that every witness assumed you were powerless only to discover the person attacking you had just made the most expensive mistake of their life? Maya straightened slowly, her notepad reorganized with the precision of someone accustomed to handling million-dollar documents. Marcus wasn't finished. Look at me when I'm talking to you. His finger jabbed toward her face, stopping inches from her nose. Do they even teach basic math where you people come from? Or are you just naturally this incompetent? The racist slur hung in the air like poison gas. Maya's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, but her voice remained level. Sir, your bill is correct. The wine alone was $847 per bottle. Don't lecture me about wine, sweetheart. Marcus's laugh was cruel, theatrical. I probably spend more on lunch than your family makes in a year. Maybe if you focused less on looking pretty and more on basic arithmetic. He gestured dismissively at her appearance, his eyes lingering with obvious disdain. The movement was calculated to humiliate, performed for his audience of wealthy onlookers. 3 tables away, Sarah Lane gripped her phone tighter. The 24-year-old tech blogger had been live streaming her interview with a startup founder when Marcus's voice cut through the restaurant's refined atmosphere. Her screen showed 2,847 viewers. Now it was climbing. 3,121, 3,456, 3,892. Holy shit, someone typed in the chat. Is this really happening? Who is this racist? Someone please tell me they're recording this. Sarah adjusted her phone angle, ensuring both Marcus and Maya remained in frame. Her journalism instincts screamed that she was witnessing something bigger than a simple restaurant dispute. Maya checked her watch, a movement so subtle most witnesses missed it entirely. 2:49 p.m. 11 minutes until the Henderson Group conference call. The call that would determine the fate of Marcus's company. The irony wasn't lost on her. Marcus Blackwell, CEO of Tech Flow Industries, was currently destroying his own future without realizing it. But Maya had learned patience in boardrooms far more hostile than this dining room. Sir, I can have the manager recalculate if you prefer. Oh, now you want to pass the buck? Marcus's voice rose another octave. This is exactly what's wrong with affirmative action hires. Give people jobs they're not qualified for, and look what happens. A woman at table 6 winced visibly. An elderly man near the window shook his head but said nothing. The uncomfortable silence stretched as Marcus continued his performance. I bet you can't even tell me what 15% of $2,300 is without a calculator. He crossed his arms, supremely confident. Go ahead. Show everyone how qualified you are. Maya's response was immediate. $345. Marcus blinked. He hadn't expected the instant correct answer. Lucky guess, he muttered, but his certainty wavered for just a moment. As Maya reached for her jacket to pull out a calculator she didn't need, 3 items became briefly visible. A first-class boarding pass, JFK to Geneva, departing Thursday. The edge of an American Express Centurion card, the legendary black card issued only to individuals spending over $250,000 annually. A Mont Blanc pen, the Meisterstück series, favored by Fortune 500 executives. Marcus noticed none of these details. His attention was fixed on maintaining his performance, feeding off the crowd's discomfort. David Sterling materialized beside their table like a nervous ghost. The Meridian Club's manager had built his career on reading power dynamics, and Marcus Blackwell represented 8 figures in annual membership fees. "Is everything all right here, Mr. Blackwell?" Sterling's voice carried the practiced deference of someone who'd spent 20 years bowing to wealth. "Your waitress can't handle basic math, David." Marcus gestured at Maya as if she were an inanimate object. "I'm questioning whether your hiring standards have slipped." Sterling's eyes darted between Marcus and Maya. The calculation was visible on his face. Billionaire member versus expendable staff. "Maya, perhaps you could step aside for a moment?" Sterling's tone was apologetic but firm. "Let me handle Mr. Blackwell's concerns personally." Maya's hands remained steady as she set down her notepad. "Of course, Mr. Sterling." But as she stepped back, she checked her watch again. 2:51 p.m. 9 minutes. Sarah's live stream had exploded to 12,487 viewers. Screenshots were already circulating on Twitter. Racist billionaire attacks waitress at NYC restaurant. "This is Marcus Blackwell, CEO of TechFlow Industries. Remember this face? Someone needs to identify this restaurant and this woman. She deserves better." The hashtag Meridian Meltdown began trending in the New York metro area. But the narrative was splitting. Some viewers saw Maya as a victim, others bought into Marcus's performance. "Entitled waitresses can't handle criticism," read one comment. "If you can't do basic math, maybe food service isn't for you," typed another. The digital mob was forming on both sides. Marcus sensed the shifting attention and doubled down. He pulled out his phone, ostensibly to film Maya's response to Sterling's intervention. "This is going to make a great case study," he announced to the room. "How not to run a business. David, I want to see her publicly recalculate this bill. Let's see if she can get it right the second time." The demand was designed to maximize Maya's humiliation. 37 diners, titans of industry, social media influencers, political power brokers, all watching a young black woman being forced to prove her basic competence. Maya looked at Sterling, who nodded reluctantly. Then she looked at Marcus, whose phone camera was trained on her face. 2:52 p.m. 8 minutes until the Henderson call. "Of course, Mr. Blackwell," Maya said quietly. "I'd be happy to walk through the calculations again." Her voice carried no trace of anger or frustration. If anything, she sounded almost amused. Marcus's phone captured every word, every gesture. He had no idea he was documenting his own destruction. Maya stepped forward to recalculate the bill, but Marcus wasn't satisfied with mere humiliation. He wanted complete submission. "Actually, David, I think this requires more serious intervention." Marcus's voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to moving markets with a phone call. "This level of incompetence reflects poorly on your establishment." Sterling's face went pale. The Meridian Club's reputation depended on members like Marcus Blackwell. One negative review from him could destroy decades of carefully cultivated exclusivity. "Of course, Mr. Blackwell, Maya. Please step into the office so we can discuss this properly." But Marcus raised his hand, stopping the movement. "No, I want this handled publicly. Everyone here witnessed her failure. They should witness the consequences." The restaurant had become a theater, and Marcus was directing the performance. 37 witnesses sat frozen, their expensive meals forgotten as they watched the systematic destruction of a young woman's dignity. Maya's fingers brushed her watch again. 2:53 p.m. 7 minutes until the Henderson call. Security theater. Sterling's hand trembled as he reached for his radio. "Security to the executive dining room. Non-urgent but immediate. Within 90 seconds, 2 guards appeared. James Rodriguez, ex-NYPD, and Kevin Walsh, former military police. Both men had worked private security long enough to recognize the script they were being asked to perform. "Gentlemen, we have a staff performance issue that requires documentation," Sterling explained, his corporate speak failing to mask the obvious racial dynamics at play. Rodriguez's jaw tightened. He'd seen this movie before. Walsh avoided eye contact entirely. "Ma'am, we're going to need you to step aside while management reviews the situation," Rodriguez said, his tone professional but apologetic. Maya nodded calmly. "I understand." But Marcus wasn't finished. "Actually, I want them to escort her out. This kind of attitude is exactly why some people never advance in life." The room's tension ratcheted higher. A woman at table 12 pulled out her phone to record. Two men near the bar exchanged uncomfortable glances, but remained seated. Digital wildfire. Sarah's live stream had become appointment television. Her viewer count hit 23,891 and climbing. The chat moved so fast she couldn't read individual comments, but the sentiment was clear. America was watching a real-time racial confrontation. Screenshots flooded social media platforms. Twitter, breaking. Tech billionaire Marcus Blackwell publicly humiliates black waitress at NYC restaurant. Instagram. This is happening right now at the Meridian Club. TikTok. Racist billionaire thinks he can destroy this woman's life. The hashtag Meridian Meltdown had gone national. News outlets began picking up the story. Someone had identified the restaurant's location, and protesters were already gathering outside. But the narrative remained split. Marcus's supporters rallied around him. Rich people work hard for their money. They deserve proper service. If she can't handle the job, she shouldn't have applied. Stop making everything about race. The digital mob was forming battle lines. The crowd fractures. As the security guards flanked Maya, something shifted in the restaurant's atmosphere. The initial shock was wearing off, replaced by growing unease among the witnesses. Margaret Lane, Sarah's aunt and a civil rights attorney, stood abruptly from table 9. "This is inappropriate, Mr. Sterling. You're creating a hostile work environment." Marcus whirled toward her. "Mind your own business, lady. This is between me and management." "Public discrimination is everyone's business," Margaret replied, her voice cutting through the tension. Other diners began murmuring. The spell of Marcus's authority was breaking as people realized they were complicit in something ugly. Dr. Robert Kim, a psychiatrist dining with colleagues, shook his head visibly. "This is getting out of hand." But Marcus sensed the shifting dynamics and escalated further. "You people always stick together, don't you?" Maybe that's the real problem here. The racial slur was barely coded, but its meaning was crystal clear. Several diners gasped audibly. Maya's mysterious confidence. Throughout the escalation, Maya remained unnaturally composed. While security guards positioned themselves around her, while Marcus's phone recorded her every reaction, while 37 pairs of eyes dissected her responses, she maintained the bearing of someone who knew something nobody else did. 2:54 p.m. 6 minutes until the Henderson call. "Mr. Blackwell," Maya said quietly, "are you certain you want to continue this course of action?" The question caught him off guard. There was something in her tone, not pleading or fear, but almost concern, as if she were trying to warn him about something. "What's that supposed to mean?" Marcus demanded. Maya simply smiled. It wasn't the smile of someone who was defeated. It was the smile of someone who was about to win a game the opponent didn't even know they were playing. The final push. Marcus's confusion transformed into rage. How dare this waitress, this nobody, speak to him as if she had any power in this situation? "You know what? I've changed my mind, David. I don't want her suspended. I want her fired, right now, in front of everyone." Sterling's hands shook as he pulled out his phone. This was beyond his usual conflict resolution protocol, but Marcus Blackwell's annual membership fees exceeded Sterling's salary by a factor of 20. "Maya, I'm sorry, but given the circumstances—" "You're making a mistake," Maya interrupted gently, not pleading, not begging, simply stating a fact. Marcus laughed, a sound devoid of humor. "The only mistake here is your hiring practices, David. Some people just aren't cut out for jobs that require thinking." Maya checked her watch one final time. 2:55 p.m. 5 minutes until the Henderson Group conference call. She reached into her jacket pocket, not for tissues or a resignation letter, but for her phone. Her movements were deliberate, calm, almost ceremonial. The entire restaurant watched as she composed a single text message. Her thumb hovered over the send button for just a moment. Then she looked directly at Marcus, her eyes holding his gaze with steady intensity. "Mr. Blackwell, last chance. Are you absolutely certain you want to continue?" Marcus's face twisted with contempt. "Send me your worst, sweetheart." Maya smiled again, that same mysterious expression that suggested she knew something he didn't. She pressed send. The message. The text was brief, professional, devastating. Initiate Protocol 7. Authorization, Richardson Alpha 9. Effective immediately. Marcus's phone buzzed 3 seconds later. Then again. Then it started ringing. His CFO's name flashed on the screen. The color drained from his face as he answered. "What? Now? But the call isn't until—" The voice on the other end was frantic, panicked. Marcus's expression shifted from confusion to horror in real time. "What do you mean Maya Richardson is calling off the deal?" Marcus pressed the phone closer to his ear, his face cycling through confusion, disbelief, then pure terror. The entire restaurant watched his transformation in real time as 37 witnesses became transfixed by his public unraveling. "Richardson? Maya Richardson from Goldman Sachs?" His voice cracked on the last word. "That's impossible. She's just a—" The CFO's voice was loud enough for nearby tables to hear fragments. "Calling off the Henderson deal. Says you created a hostile environment. The board is freaking out. Stock already dropping." Marcus's hand began to shake violently. He ended the call and immediately started frantically Googling on his phone. Maya Richardson, Goldman Sachs, Managing Director. The search results loaded instantly. LinkedIn profiles showing her Harvard MBA, Forbes articles about her record-breaking deals, Wall Street Journal features on her influence in private wealth management. Photo after photo of the same woman now standing calmly before him in a server's uniform. His phone slipped from his trembling fingers, clattering onto the marble floor. The same floor where he'd made Maya retrieve his credit card just minutes earlier. The identity revelation. Maya stepped forward, her entire demeanor shifting from service staff to corporate executive in a single fluid moment. Her posture straightened with the bearing of someone accustomed to commanding rooms full of billionaires. Her voice took on the crisp authority of boardroom power. "Allow me to properly introduce myself," she said, her tone cutting through the restaurant's stunned silence like a blade through silk. "Maya Richardson, Senior Managing Director at Goldman Sachs Private Wealth Management. I oversee institutional investments for pension funds, endowments, and sovereign wealth funds totaling $23.7 billion in assets under management." The restaurant erupted in whispers, gasps, and the soft clicking of phones as diners frantically Googled her name. Sarah's live stream chat exploded with viewers sharing Maya's professional credentials in real time, her viewer count now approaching 6 figures. Sterling's face went white as paper, then green around the edges. He'd just attempted to fire one of Wall Street's most powerful investment managers. His career flashed before his eyes, 20 years of building relationships with Manhattan's elite, destroyed in a single afternoon. "I've been handling your company's acquisition negotiations for the past 6 months, Mr. Blackwell," Maya continued, checking her vintage Cartier watch with casual precision that now made perfect sense. "This lunch break was scheduled between my morning meeting with Henderson Group's acquisition committee and our 3 p.m. final approval conference call." Marcus's legs nearly buckled. He gripped the table edge for support. TechFlow Industries wasn't just seeking any acquisition. The Henderson Group deal represented $4.2 billion, 32.8% of his company's total valuation. Without it, every analyst on Wall Street projected a catastrophic 47% stock decline within 18 months. His company would become a takeover target for vulture capitalists. The power dynamic explodes. But Maya wasn't finished dismantling his world. She reached into her tailored jacket and withdrew a slim leather portfolio that definitely didn't belong to restaurant staff. The kind of understated luxury that screamed serious money. "I also personally manage $847 million in pension fund investments currently held in TechFlow Industries stock," she said, opening the portfolio to reveal official Goldman Sachs documents bearing the firm's distinctive letterhead. "Representing the retirement funds of teachers, firefighters, police officers, and municipal workers across 12 states. The mathematics hit Marcus like a physical blow to the solar plexus. Maya Richardson didn't just control his acquisition. She controlled nearly $1 billion of his company's institutional investor base. One recommendation from her could trigger a massive sell-off that would crater his stock price overnight. "That's not possible," he whispered, his voice barely audible above the restaurant's growing murmur of conversation. "You're a waitress. You work here." Maya's laugh was genuinely amused, the sound of someone who'd heard this particular form of incredulity many times before. "I volunteer here twice a month through Goldman Sachs's community service program, Mr. Blackwell. The Meridian Club partners with our corporate philanthropy initiative. I find it refreshing to interact with people who judge me on the quality of my service rather than the size of my portfolio." The irony was absolutely devastating. Marcus had just publicly humiliated the one person who held his company's future in her hands during her volunteer work at the very establishment where he was a premium member. Dr. Robert Kim leaned toward his dining companion and whispered, "This is the most spectacular example of unconscious bias I've ever witnessed. Someone should write a case study. The witnesses react." Margaret Lane was already taking detailed notes on her phone, her legal mind automatically calculating the discrimination lawsuit that could emerge from this debacle. The damages alone could reach 8 figures, given the public nature of the humiliation and Maya's professional standing. Dr. Patricia Williams, the Columbia sociology professor, was recording everything with the intensity of someone documenting a historic moment. "This is going to be required viewing in every business ethics course in America," she murmured to her colleague. Sarah's live stream had exploded to 94,847 viewers. The chat was moving so fast, individual comments blurred into digital chaos. "Holy shit, she's a Goldman Sachs managing director. He just destroyed his own company. $4.2 billion mistake in real time. This is the best plot twist in history. Someone call Netflix, this needs to be a movie." Sterling was now visibly hyperventilating, loosening his tie as the reality hit him. Not only had he nearly fired a Goldman Sachs executive, but he'd done it in front of dozens of Manhattan's most influential people and hundreds of thousands of live viewers. Marcus's desperate calculations. Marcus's phone began ringing again. His head of legal, then his board chairman, then his PR director. The calls were coming faster than he could decline them, each ringtone another nail in the coffin of his reputation. News of the confrontation was spreading through financial networks at digital light speed. Bloomberg terminals across Wall Street were pinging with alerts. TechFlow's stock price, still trading on after-hours international markets, had already dropped 5.7% as word leaked that their crucial acquisition was in serious jeopardy. Maya. Miss Richardson. Marcus's voice was barely a whisper, the same tone someone might use when diagnosed with a terminal illness. I didn't know. I made a mistake. A terrible, terrible mistake. But Maya's expression remained professionally neutral, the same carefully controlled demeanor she used when delivering bad news to clients who'd lost millions on poor investment choices. Mr. Blackwell, you made several mistakes this afternoon, she said with clinical precision. But ignorance of my identity isn't one of them. You saw a young black woman in a service position and assumed she was powerless, unintelligent, and unworthy of basic human respect. She gestured toward the security guards still flanking her, both men now looking deeply uncomfortable about their role in the afternoon's events. You used racial slurs, demanded my termination, and filmed my humiliation for your personal entertainment. These weren't mistakes, Mr. Blackwell. They were choices. The final secret. Maya's phone buzzed with an incoming call. She glanced at the screen and held it up for Marcus to see. Henderson Group, Chairman Morrison. This is the call that determines your company's future, she said to Marcus with the calm of someone holding all the cards in a high-stakes poker game. I can take it here, in front of everyone, or we can discuss this privately. Marcus looked around the restaurant desperately. 37 witnesses, hundreds of thousands of online viewers. His reputation is already in free fall across social media platforms. Privately, he whispered, his voice cracking with desperation. Unfortunately, that's no longer an option, Maya replied, answering the call on speakerphone. Good afternoon, Chairman Morrison. Yes, I'm still at the incident location. The voice that emerged from her phone was crisp, authoritative, and completely unforgiving. Maya, the board has reviewed the live stream footage. We're extremely concerned about TechFlow's corporate culture and leadership judgment. Marcus's face crumpled as he realized his company's fate was being decided in real time, broadcast live to hundreds of thousands of viewers across the globe. But Maya had saved one revelation for last. As Chairman Morrison continued speaking on the phone, she reached into her portfolio and withdrew another document with deliberate theatrical timing. There's one more thing you should know, Mr. Blackwell, she said, holding up a letterhead that made Marcus's remaining color drain completely away. I'm also the Henderson Group's primary investment advisor. I've been representing both sides of your acquisition for the past 6 months. The restaurant fell completely silent except for Chairman Morrison's voice on speaker. Maya, whatever recommendation you make regarding TechFlow's character assessment, the board will support fully. Marcus realized the complete magnitude of his destruction. He hadn't just insulted a Goldman Sachs executive, he'd racially abused the one person who controlled both sides of the most important business deal of his life. Maya looked at her watch one final time. 2:59 p.m. Chairman Morrison, I'll need exactly 60 seconds to provide my final recommendation on the TechFlow acquisition. She ended the call and looked directly at Marcus, her expression unreadable. Mr. Blackwell, you now have 1 minute to convince me why I should recommend proceeding with a $4.2 billion investment in a company whose CEO just demonstrated profound racial bias, catastrophically poor judgment, and complete disrespect for basic professional conduct. The countdown had begun. Marcus's empire hung in the balance, and Maya Richardson held every single card. Marcus's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. 60 seconds to save a $4.2 billion deal. 60 seconds to prevent his company's destruction. The mathematics were brutal and simple. Maya, Miss Richardson, please, he stammered, his billionaire confidence evaporating in real time. I can explain. I can make this right. Maya pulled out her phone, opening the timer app with theatrical precision. You have 55 seconds remaining, Mr. Blackwell. I suggest you make them count. The entire restaurant watched in fascination as one of America's most powerful tech moguls prepared to grovel before the woman he'd just tried to destroy, the data speaks. Maya opened her leather portfolio and began reading with the clinical precision of a forensic accountant delivering a verdict. Let me provide some context for your 60 seconds, Mr. Blackwell. TechFlow Industries, current market capitalization, $12.8 billion. The Henderson Group acquisition represents $4.2 billion, or 32.8% of your total company value. Her voice carried the authority of someone who'd memorized every number, every clause, every contingency in the deal. Without this acquisition, your Q4 projections show a revenue shortfall of $1.7 billion. Your debt-to-equity ratio will breach the 2.3 threshold outlined in Section 47B of your primary credit facility. Your lenders will demand immediate restructuring. Marcus's face went ashen. She knew his company's financials better than he did. Additionally, Maya continued, consulting another document, Goldman Sachs manages pension fund holdings of $847 million in TechFlow stock. Our fiduciary duty requires us to protect these investments from companies exhibiting material character risks. She looked up from her papers, her expression professionally neutral, but devastating. 40 seconds remaining. Legal frameworks. Maya's tone shifted into the precise language of corporate law, each word chosen for maximum impact. The Henderson Group acquisition agreement includes Clause 47B, material character concerns. This clause specifically addresses situations where executive behavior creates reputational risk exposure for stakeholders. Margaret Lane, the civil rights attorney, nodded approvingly from her table. She recognized expert legal maneuvering when she saw it. Your public display of racial discrimination, filmed and witnessed by dozens of people, absolutely qualifies as a material character concern under Delaware corporate law, Maya explained. Henderson Group's board has fiduciary duties to their shareholders to avoid investments that create unnecessary PR and legal liability. Marcus's breathing became labored. But the merger, we've been planning this for months. The synergies alone are worth 25 seconds, Maya interrupted calmly. The ultimatum. Maya closed her portfolio and faced Marcus directly, her voice taking on the tone she used when delivering final terms to opposing negotiators. Here are your options, Mr. Blackwell. Option 1. You issue a formal public apology within the next 6 hours. You commit TechFlow Industries to mandatory bias training for all C-suite executives within 30 days. You establish a $500,000 annual diversity scholarship fund administered by an independent third party. She paused, watching his face process the demands. Additionally, you personally donate $50,000 to the NAACP Legal Defense Fund and complete 40 hours of community service at organizations serving communities of color. Marcus's mouth hung open. The financial demands alone were manageable, but the public humiliation would be career-defining. Option 2, Maya continued with surgical precision. I call Chairman Morrison back in 15 seconds and recommend immediate termination of the Henderson Group acquisition due to material character concerns. Your stock price will crater by the open market tomorrow. Your board will likely demand your resignation within a week. Corporate mathematics. Maya pulled out her phone and began calculating in real time, her fingers moving across the screen with the speed of someone who lived and breathed financial analysis. Let me help you with mathematics, Mr. Blackwell. Without the Henderson deal, TechFlow's valuation drops to approximately $8.1 billion. Your personal stake, 18.7% of outstanding shares, loses approximately $861 million in value overnight. The numbers hit Marcus like physical blows, his net worth, built over 2 decades, evaporating because of a 20-minute tantrum. The pension funds I manage will likely divest their positions within 90 days, creating additional downward pressure. Conservative estimates suggest your personal net worth drops from $8.2 billion to approximately $4.7 billion. Sarah's livestream chat exploded with viewers trying to process the scale of financial destruction being calculated in real time. She's doing the math live. $3.5 billion mistake. This is better than Netflix. Boardroom pressure. Marcus's phone buzzed incessantly. His board members were clearly watching the live stream, their panic evident in the constant calling. TechFlow's stock price, visible on financial apps across the restaurant, continued its downward slide, minus 7.2% and falling. 10 seconds, mister, Blackwell, Maya announced. Marcus looked around desperately. Sterling was hyperventilating. The security guards looked deeply uncomfortable. 37 witnesses watched with the intensity of a crowd at a public execution. Marcus's voice cracked. I choose option 1. The professional response. Maya's expression didn't change, but she nodded once with the efficiency of someone closing a major deal. Excellent. I'll need those commitments in writing within 6 hours. Our legal department will draft the appropriate agreements. She speed-dialed Chairman Morrison, putting the call on speaker once again. Chairman Morrison, I've completed my assessment. TechFlow Industries has agreed to comprehensive remediation measures addressing today's incident. I'm recommending we proceed with the acquisition contingent on verified completion of the agreed-upon reforms. The relief in Morrison's voice was audible. Excellent work, Maya. The board appreciates your thorough handling of this situation. Consequences and compliance. But Maya wasn't finished establishing her dominance. She pulled out another document from her seemingly endless portfolio. Mr. Blackwell, I'm also implementing enhanced monitoring protocols. Goldman Sachs will require quarterly diversity and inclusion reports from TechFlow Industries. Any future incidents of discrimination will trigger immediate review of our investment positions. She handed him a business card with corporate accountability partners printed in elegant serif font. You'll also be working with CAP to implement systemic changes. They specialize in executive bias remediation for Fortune 500 companies. Their success rate is excellent, though their methods can be intensive. Marcus accepted the card with trembling hands, his empire intact, but his authority permanently altered. The power shift. Maya checked her watch one final time. The Henderson Group call has been rescheduled for 4 p.m. to allow you time to process today's agreements. I suggest you use the next hour wisely. She turned to Sterling, who was still visibly shaking. Mr. Sterling, I trust there won't be any employment issues related to today's incident? No, ma'am, absolutely not. Maya, you're always welcome here, and we're honored by your volunteer service, Sterling stammered, his voice thick with relief and terror. Maya nodded professionally, then addressed the restaurant at large. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience during this business discussion. I apologize for any disruption to your dining experience. The intellectual victory. As Maya gathered her materials, the profound nature of her victory became clear to everyone watching. She hadn't used violence, hadn't screamed, hadn't even raised her voice. She'd wielded data, legal frameworks, and institutional power with surgical precision. Marcus remained seated, staring at his hands. His phone continued buzzing with calls from board members, lawyers, and PR specialists who would spend the next week managing the fallout from his 20-minute meltdown. Sarah's live stream had peaked at 127,398 viewers. The story was already being picked up by major news outlets. Number sign, Meridian Meltdown was trending globally. Maya stood, smoothed her jacket, and walked toward the exit with the bearing of someone who'd just closed another successful deal. She paused at the door and looked back at Marcus one final time. Mr. Blackwell, I hope this experience proves educational. Power isn't about humiliating others. It's about creating accountability. The door closed behind her with a soft click, leaving Marcus to contemplate the most expensive lesson of his life. True to his word, Marcus Blackwell published his public apology at 9 p.m. sharp. The statement, clearly drafted by crisis management specialists, appeared simultaneously across all major platforms. I deeply regret my inappropriate behavior toward Maya Richardson at the Meridian Club today. My words and actions were inexcusable and do not reflect the values I aspire to uphold. I take full responsibility for the harm I caused. The apology continued for 3 carefully crafted paragraphs, but the damage control felt hollow to the millions who had watched the live stream. Comments poured in by the thousands. Too little, too late. Actions have consequences, Marcus. Maya Richardson is a class act. This man is not. Within hours, hashtag accountability matters began trending alongside hashtag Meridian Meltdown. Corporate consequences. By 8 a.m. the following morning, TechFlow Industries Board had convened an emergency session. The optics were devastating. Their CEO's racist meltdown had been viewed over 2.3 million times across platforms. Several major clients were already requesting meetings to reassess partnerships. The board's decision was swift and comprehensive. Marcus would remain as CEO, but under unprecedented oversight. Chief Operating Officer Jennifer Walsh, a black Harvard MBA with 15 years at McKinsey, was promoted to executive chair with veto power over all major decisions. The board recognizes that lasting change requires structural reform, not just individual apologies, Walsh announced in a carefully choreographed press conference. We're implementing the most comprehensive bias remediation program in corporate America. Systemic transformation. The reforms Maya had demanded became industry-leading standards almost overnight. TechFlow's new policies were drafted by corporate accountability partners and implemented with military precision. Monthly bias training became mandatory for all employees, from interns to C-suite executives. The sessions weren't superficial diversity workshops. They were intensive, data-driven programs that measured behavioral change through 360-degree feedback and unconscious bias testing. The company established a chief diversity officer position with a salary of $380,000 more than most VPs earned. Dr. Angela Morrison, formerly of Google's Inclusive Hiring Initiative, was recruited to fill the role. Her mandate was clear: create measurable change or heads would roll. An anonymous reporting app, TechFlow Speaks, went live within 2 weeks. Employees could report discrimination, bias, or harassment without fear of retaliation. Every report triggered automatic investigation by external firms. The Scholarship Fund. The $500,000 annual diversity scholarship fund became Maya's personal project. Rather than delegating oversight to committees, she worked directly with the NAACP Legal Defense Fund and the United Negro College Fund to identify recipients. The first scholarship recipients were announced 3 months later. 12 students from underserved communities pursuing degrees in finance, technology, and business. Each received $41,667 annually for 4 years, plus paid internships at TechFlow and mentorship from senior executives. Marcus was required to personally meet each scholarship recipient. The first meeting, held at TechFlow's headquarters and live-streamed for transparency, was awkward but genuine. 18-year-old Jamal Washington from Detroit looked Marcus in the eye and said, "Thank you for this opportunity, but I hope you understand why trust has to be earned." Marcus's response surprised everyone. "You're absolutely right, Jamal. I hope I can prove worthy of that trust over time." The Meridian Club's transformation. David Sterling's near firing of Maya Richardson had exposed systemic problems at the Meridian Club itself. The incident forced the club's board to confront their own institutional biases. Sterling was demoted to assistant manager, though he kept his job after completing 80 hours of bias training and diversity education. The club hired Dr. Patricia Williams, the Columbia sociology professor who had witnessed the incident, as director of inclusion and member experience. New policies transformed the club's culture. Staff protection protocols prevented members from abusing employees. Any discriminatory behavior resulted in immediate membership suspension pending investigation. 3 longtime members were expelled within 6 months for various incidents. The club also expanded its community service partnership with Goldman Sachs, creating opportunities for executives to volunteer in service roles, experiencing firsthand what Maya had chosen to do. Marcus's personal journey. The most surprising transformation was Marcus Blackwell himself. His required 40 hours of community service became 120 hours by his own choice. He volunteered at food banks, tutored high school students in underserved communities, and worked with formerly incarcerated individuals seeking employment. The billionaire who had once dismissed people as naturally incompetent spent Tuesday evenings teaching financial literacy at a community center in the Bronx. His students, initially suspicious of his motives, gradually began to trust his genuine commitment to change. Money doesn't make you intelligent, Marcus reflected during a filmed interview 6 months later. I had to learn that intelligence comes in many forms, and respect shouldn't depend on someone's bank account or job title. The interview, conducted by Sarah Lane, the blogger whose live stream had captured everything, became required viewing in business ethics courses across the country. Maya's continued influence. Maya Richardson's handling of the crisis elevated her status in the financial world. Harvard Business School invited her to teach a masterclass on power, dignity, and professional response. The case study, titled The Meridian Incident, became standard curriculum in MBA programs. Goldman Sachs promoted her to Global Managing Director within 4 months, making her the youngest person ever to hold the position. Her new role involved overseeing $47 billion in assets and advising sovereign wealth funds across 3 continents. But Maya continued her volunteer work at the Meridian Club, now serving as an example of grace under pressure for other executives. New members were often told her story during orientation as an example of the club's transformed values. Industry-wide ripple effects. The Richardson Protocol became standard practice across Wall Street. Investment firms began including character assessment clauses in major deals. The precedent Maya had set, using fiduciary duty to enforce behavioral standards, became a powerful tool for corporate accountability. Other firms implemented similar policies. Blackstone, KKR, and Apollo Global Management all adopted bias training requirements for portfolio companies. The message was clear. Discrimination wasn't just morally wrong, it was financially risky. Corporate accountability partners, the firm Maya had recommended, saw their client base increase by 400% within a year. Their intensive executive coaching programs became the gold standard for bias remediation. Measurable change. 18 months after the Meridian incident, independent audits showed remarkable results. TechFlow's employee satisfaction scores among underrepresented groups increased by 67%. Retention rates for diverse hires improved by 43%. The company's inclusion index, measured by third-party consultants, ranked in the top 10% of tech companies. More importantly, the changes weren't superficial. Anonymous surveys showed that 89% of employees felt comfortable reporting bias incidents, and 76% believed leadership was genuinely committed to inclusion. The scholarship program had expanded to $2 million annually, funding education for 48 students. 12 of the first recipients had secured internships at major corporations, with 3 receiving full-time offers before graduation. The lasting legacy. Maya Richardson had achieved something remarkable. She had used intellect, legal frameworks, and economic leverage to create systemic change. Her response had been measured, strategic, and devastatingly effective. The contrast couldn't have been starker. While Marcus had used his power to humiliate and diminish, Maya had used hers to educate and elevate. Her victory wasn't just personal, it was institutional. The Meridian incident became a watershed moment in corporate accountability. It proved that individual actions have systemic consequences, and that power, when wielded thoughtfully, can create lasting positive change. As Dr. Patricia Williams noted in her academic analysis of the incident, Maya Richardson didn't just defend herself. She defended every service worker who had ever been dismissed, every professional whose competence had been questioned based on appearance, and every person who had been told they didn't belong in spaces of power. The transformation was complete. What had begun as a moment of ugly discrimination had become a masterclass in dignity, strategy, and systemic reform. Maya Richardson stood at the podium of the World Economic Forum in Davos, addressing an audience of global leaders, CEOs, and policymakers. Her presentation, titled The Economics of Dignity, had become one of the most requested talks in corporate America. "Power isn't about the ability to humiliate others," she said, her voice carrying the same calm authority that had dismantled Marcus Blackwell's empire 2 years earlier. "True power lies in creating systems that elevate human dignity while driving measurable business results." The Meridian incident had become more than a viral moment. It had sparked a global conversation about workplace respect, unconscious bias, and the intersection of social justice with economic power. Personal legacy. Maya's career had reached unprecedented heights. As global managing director at Goldman Sachs, she now oversaw $73 billion in assets. Time magazine had named her one of the 100 most influential people under 40. Harvard, Wharton, and Stanford competed to have her as a guest lecturer, but her most meaningful achievement remained personal. Maya had proven that dignity couldn't be purchased, power came in many forms, and intelligence was never determined by someone's job title or skin color. She continued volunteering at the Meridian Club monthly, now serving as a mentor to young professionals and a living example of grace under pressure. New members were still told her story during orientation, not as a cautionary tale, but as an inspiration. Marcus's redemption arc. Perhaps the most surprising transformation belonged to Marcus Blackwell himself. The man who had once dismissed entire communities as naturally incompetent had become an unlikely advocate for corporate accountability. TechFlow Industries now led the tech sector in diversity metrics. Under the oversight structure Maya had demanded, the company had increased minority representation in leadership by 340%. Employee satisfaction scores reached all-time highs. Stock price had recovered and exceeded pre-incident levels. Marcus's personal journey continued evolving. His weekly volunteering had become a cornerstone of his identity. The scholarship program he'd funded had grown to support 127 students annually. 12 graduates now work at TechFlow in leadership track positions. "I used to measure my worth by how much I could diminish others," Marcus reflected in a recent interview. "Maya taught me that real success comes from how much you can elevate others." The billionaire who had once thrown credit cards at service workers now spent his Tuesday evenings teaching financial literacy to single mothers in the South Bronx. Social impact revolution. The Richardson model has been adopted by over 200 corporations worldwide. The combination of economic leverage, legal frameworks, and moral clarity had proven devastatingly effective at creating institutional change. Corporate bias incidents dropped by 67% among companies implementing Richardson model protocols. Employee retention among underrepresented groups increased by an average of 52%. Most importantly, anonymous reporting of discrimination incidents increased by 234%, suggesting that people finally felt safe speaking truth to power. The model had been studied by Harvard, Wharton, and Stanford business schools. International consulting firms now offer Richardson Protocol implementation as a standard service. The approach had been translated into 12 languages and adapted for different cultural contexts across 6 continents. Broader cultural shift. Sarah Lane, the blogger whose live stream had captured everything, had leveraged the viral moment into a career as a social justice journalist. Her documentary, The Power of One Voice, chronicling the Meridian incident and its aftermath, had won 3 Emmy nominations. The hashtag Meridian Meltdown lived on as shorthand for accountability moments. Instances where seemingly powerless individuals used intelligence, preparation, and moral clarity to challenge institutional bias. Corporate executives now faced a new reality. Discriminatory behavior carried real financial consequences. The Maya Richardson test had become common terminology in boardrooms, asking whether any action would survive public scrutiny and maintain fiduciary responsibilities. Values in action. Maya's response had demonstrated core principles that resonated far beyond corporate America. Dignity isn't negotiable, regardless of someone's position or paycheck. Respect should flow from basic humanity, not hierarchical power. Intelligence manifests in countless forms. Academic credentials, professional titles, and bank account balances don't determine someone's worth or capability. Strategic thinking defeats emotional reactions. Maya had channeled her anger into systematic change rather than personal revenge. Economic leverage can drive social justice. When used thoughtfully, financial power becomes a tool for creating equitable systems. Institutional change requires sustained effort. One viral moment meant nothing without follow-through, measurement, and accountability. Your role in change. The story of Maya Richardson and Marcus Blackwell proves that transformation is possible, but only when people choose courage over comfort. How many workplace injustices have you witnessed but stayed silent about? What would happen if you spoke up next time you saw discrimination? How can you use whatever power you possess, economic, social, or moral, to create more equitable spaces? Maya didn't set out to become a symbol of corporate accountability. She was simply a professional woman doing volunteer work who refused to accept disrespect. Her response wasn't perfect or superhuman, it was prepared, strategic, and grounded in dignity. Take action. Today, share your own experiences with workplace discrimination in the comments below. What would you have done in Maya's situation? How can we create more inclusive spaces in our own communities and workplaces? If this story resonated with you, subscribe to Black Voices Uncut for more stories of quiet strength overcoming systemic bias. Share this video with someone who needs to remember their own power. Tag someone who exemplifies grace under pressure. Let's celebrate people who create change through intelligence, preparation, and unwavering dignity. Because real power isn't about tearing others down, it's about building systems that lift everyone up. The next Maya Richardson might be you. The question is, when your moment comes, will you be ready?
Reality isn't always easy to hear, but that's exactly why we tell it. At Black Voices Uncut, we go beyond the surface, showing what others won't. If you value unfiltered truth, hit like, comment your perspective, and subscribe. Every voice matters, and every truth deserves to be heard.